Hi, I'm Debbie Moraes, and this is Legal Matters once again, the program that's designed to address timely and critical issues that face consumers and businesses today. It's legal information, practical solutions, and straight talk about a wide variety of topics. We had been discussing a loan modification plan, which had helped homeowners who can't refinance or have trouble affording their mortgages, those who were in trouble, really be able to stay in their home and stave off foreclosure. We today are going to discuss another very important and timely topic. Those of you who have been reading and aware of it, healthcare reform. A little bit about the question of constitutionality, but more focused on how it could affect you. And to discuss these issues, we have with us once again our legal eagles, Jackie Grasso and David Bazar from Audette Bazar Cordero Grasso Law Firm in East Providence. And
Hello.
It's time to start. I guess the first question, and we don't probably need to spend much time on it, but there is some question about whether this is really constitutional. What do you want to say about that?
Well, I think what we really want to talk about for the most part this half hour is how it's going to affect people.
Exactly.
And this is from a legal perspective. We're not here to take any political point of view on this. But there have been several lawsuits filed by attorney generals from Florida and many other states and Virginia. And they are challenging the law on its constitutional basis. So very quickly, the 10th Amendment says that all power that hasn't been specifically given to the federal government is reserved to the state and the people. That's the main focus of some of these suits. But there's also in the Constitution the Supremacy Clause that says if the federal government speaks on an issue, that preempts state law. And some states have passed laws that would put in effect opposite positions as to what the federal government has already passed. And most constitutional scholars feel that these laws or the challenges on the constitutionality of the statute will not hold muster.
I understand, too, though, that with the Ninth Amendment, they talk about the Bill of Rights and whether or not this reform is constitutional because it makes the government suddenly force you to have health care when, in fact, you may not want it. Different from perhaps as we spoke about at one point, auto insurance, where you vote to have a car. You buy the car, then you must have the insurance. But with this, you really might be having your powers, your personal rights stripped away from you. Is that going to have some constitutional ground?
Again, the constitutional scholars, and I'm not a constitutional scholar, but from what I've read, agree for the most part that that won't hold up either because people don't have to get the insurance. All they will have to do is pay a penalty. So the government creates laws that require people to do some things, and the challenge is you can't require people to have insurance if they don't want it. Well, they don't have to, but there will be a penalty if you don't.
Except they're presently doing that in the state of Massachusetts right now.
Right.
Because if you don't, excuse me, if you don't have insurance, there is a penalty.
Of course, you might argue, and some probably will, I'm not sure what the health care is actually going to cost me, but wouldn't it be cheaper for me just to not get it, pay the penalty, and save myself some money? I mean, how are they going to enforce that? And I guess they are trying to move away from a nominal amount to something more significant.
Well, literally it is cheaper, but what would happen if you had a drastic accident, a fatal illness?
Right.
Then the cost is much more severe.
Right. And just go back one step. Remember that the purpose for having this reform was so that people would have coverage. And the whole idea is affordable coverage. And the point of it is that the drag on the economy for medical costs in the United States is extreme. And as Jackie can tell you, there's been some surveys I've seen that about 62% of all bankruptcies in the United States
involve medical issues, medical expenses that, quite frankly, out of their reach.
Right.
It's just unaffordable.
So given all of that, what they've tried to do is give us a bill that gives the consumer and businesses some opportunity to have a more affordable insurance package.
So let's get into that a little bit. Healthcare reform. It's being reformed. I think most people first mention now people will not be denied because of pre-existing conditions. What can you tell us about how that works? Businesses or people, how people are dealing with it?
Individuals cannot be denied because they have a pre-existing condition. As it stands right now, without the act having taken effect, I think in 2000.
The 2010 part of the act would allow children with
Immediately.
pre-existing
Yes.
to immediately have coverage.
But adults cannot be refused for pre-existing conditions, nor can nor can an insurance company rescind their benefits. So, for instance, if somebody gets sick and it's costing the health insurance company a lot of money for their care, in the past what the insurance companies would do, it was like an auto insurance. If you have too many claims, we're going to cut you off. We're going
Right.
to cancel your policy. Can't do that anymore.
In fact, that part goes in immediately. In
right.
2014, for adults, the pre-existing condition would go into effect. So that right now, if someone has a pre-existing condition, they're developing some high-risk pools, they would
right.
call it, to provide coverage for people who do have an illness already.
And back on what you were mentioning a moment ago, Jackie, the limit of liability, is that something that's going to take effect gradually, or is that something that's automatically kicked in where you're saying that they could just cancel your insurance? Now, are they not able to do that right now?
They're not able to do that right now until it takes effect in 2014.
Okay,
But
so
presently, what's happening, what David was talking about, there's a risk pool. So almost, again, equated to auto industry.
right.
If you're a high-risk driver, you can buy from the risk pool. Every state has one set up. It's a little bit more expensive, but again, you can't be refused insurance because of that pre-existing condition.
Yeah, and part of what Jackie's talking about in 2014 is this insurance exchange that each state will be setting up to provide people and businesses the opportunity, but I think it's really designed for people who don't get it through a group plan to buy insurance at a more affordable rate where the state will have an oversight as to bringing insurance companies into the state to sell medical insurance.
A little more competition, perhaps. I think with businesses, too, they said, well, let's talk about businesses. Every business must provide health insurance?
If there's a
When?
business with fewer than 50 employees, then the business will get tax credits for employee premiums. So it's a little bit of a complicated formula.
Yeah.
What they do is they subtract the first 30 employees.
There's two different things.
Yeah.
The first 30 employees get subtracted from businesses that have
Have
more than
50 or more,
50
yeah.
and don't provide coverage because they'll be paying a penalty or a tax for not providing the coverage. For those businesses, as Jackie was just explaining, that have 50 or less, there's some tax credits and benefits available to them. It's twofold, though, and it is complicated.
Yeah.
It's how much you pay for an average wage, and if your average wage is less than $25,000 and you have on a sliding scale down to 10 or less employees, there's a full credit, and then it's pro rata going up, depending on up to $50,000 for an average wage and 50 employees.
And I understand as a incentive to small businesses, those who have fewer than 25 don't have to have it, but they're trying to give them some sort of an incentive so
That's
that they
the reason
will
for the tax
be
credit.
giving them
Right.
enough, hopefully enough of an incentive so that it's worthwhile for them to consider doing that. So it's there to help families. Let's talk about families because apparently there's a very big issue about what the new upper age limit is. The 26-year-old can still be on mom and dad's plan. What can you tell us about that?
And let's talk about the way
What
it
it-
is today. If somebody is in college full-time, you're able to stay on your parents' health insurance plan until age 21.
And I have to tell you from personal experience,
His experience
what
that,
a
yeah.
pain in the butt, if we can say that,
Yeah.
it is sometimes with insurance companies to keep your child on. I have a daughter who's in college. She had a little bit of an illness that we had to have hospitalization for. Went to the hospital. They said, oh, this is right after January 1st. She's no longer covered. I said, well, what do you mean she's not covered? Well, contact your insurance company. So I did. And they said, well, she's 20 years old. And I said, yeah, well, we sent you her college enrollment form. Well, you have to send that again. And now she's got to get medications. There was a prescription plan. I had to pay for that all out of pocket. This new law allows children to stay on to 26.
26, yeah. So you don't have to provide evidence that they're a full-time student in college.
Right.
It's 26, which is great because, well, if they're not a full-time student in college as it exists right now, you're cut off at age 19, correct? Yeah,
yeah.
you're cut off at age 19.
One peculiar little quirk about this that I read, and it's hard to imagine, but